Hello dancers! Today we're going to go over how to sew your pointe shoes. This is a very beginner friendly tutorial. So I'm just showing you the new shoes. They don't come with ribbons and elastics attached, unfortunately. So we want to make sure we have our ribbons. If you get a piece of ribbon that's all in one piece, it should be long enough to cut it into quarters. So you're going to cut it into 4 equal parts, and you're going to cut your elastic into 2 equal parts. And just a reminder, this video is for sewing a single elastic, not a crisscross. I have a different video for that. And these are the supplies I'm using. The lighter is for melting the end of the ribbons and elastics so that they don't fray. That little thing I just showed is a seam ripper. Today I'm going to use some black thread just so you can see my stitches better. Now, you are not going to use black thread. You're going to use nylon upholstery thread in a color that matches your pointe shoes. After I sew with the black thread, I'm going to sew with my nylon thread in the pink color. You can order that from Amazon, and I'll have it linked below. Now I'm just showing you how to measure a generic way to sew ribbons. This is for placement. You're going to fold that heel seam all the way up nice and flat and crease the sides and make a mark right there following that diagonal. There you go. See how I'm folding it and making sure it's flat. Now right here you can kind of see the back seam gets a little bit crooked. Do you see how it's not laying all the way straight down the shoe? So that's going to affect my ribbon placement here. It's going to make it a little bit further back on this side, which is okay. It's not the end of the world, but if you just are nice and careful and make sure that seam stays straight down the middle of the shank, then your ribbons will be more even. So got my ribbons. I'm going to sew with some stretchy ribbon today. Of course, traditionally satin ribbon was used, but the stretchy is a lot more comfortable these days. I'm just showing you how to measure how much thread you want. If you're a short person or a small person, you might want to do 3 arm lengths, but I'm pretty tall and I have a big wingspan, so I'm just using 2. But make sure you have enough that you're not going to run out. And we're going to go ahead and thread our needle. When choosing a needle, make sure you're not choosing one that's really, really thin and short. You want to have one that has, you know, a little bit easier grip to it, especially if you're using a little bit thicker thread like you should be with your nylon upholstery thread. The material on pointe shoes can also be pretty thick, so a thin needle is going to be more likely to bend, so go ahead with a little bit thicker needle. And there I'm tying a knot. Because this is polyester thread, which you are not going to use, right? It's pretty thin and not very strong, so I'm tying 2 knots to make sure it doesn't slip through the fabric. There we go. And a little snip snip haircut. Showing my marks. You can see how uneven they are. I was doing this like at midnight, so I didn't really notice in the moment. But that's okay. We're just all learning here. One side of your ribbon will typically be shinier, and one side of the ribbon will be a little more matte. With the stretch ribbon, it's not as obvious, but you can tell. And typically you're going to want that shinier side to be facing out away from your foot, okay? So out to where the audience will see. So you see me just melting the edge of the ribbon there. It just melts. It can catch on fire, but you'd have to hold it there for quite a long time for it to actually really catch. But just quickly blow it out. Blow on it before you touch it. And then there it is. Again, So we're going to fold the mat side to mat side. And just a reminder, this is just one way to sew your ribbons and elastic. I find this to be the most beginner-friendly version, but as you continue on sewing more and more point shoes as you're developing in your point work, you can tailor it a little more precisely to how you like it or how your studio likes it. But this is just a great way for you to start. Now I'm showing you here, you're going to take that edge of where you folded and you're going to line it up with the seam of the drawstring casing, not the bottom of the drawstring fabric. That's different. There's a little seam lining that up, and I'm going to sew right along that seam there. We're not going to go above the seam to make sure we don't sew through the drawstring. All right, so here it is, nice and lined up. Going to perform a whip stitch. So you're not going all the way through the other side. You're just staying on this side. We're going through the fabric of the shoe and then through the ribbon. And then pulling it tight. And then you'll see me kind of pulling on the thread every now and again with my fingers. That's just to make sure that it's straight and that it doesn't have any knots. So here you go, you see on the other side. I didn't go through onto the other side. If you do go through the other side, it's not a big deal. You can see there's two pieces of fabric I showed you, rubbing them together. So we're really just sewing through the lining. Here I go again, through the lining, using my finger in the back, behind it, pushing, so I can kind of tell where I'm going. Just go nice and slow, take your time, and you won't poke yourself. And there we go. And we're going to continue this stitch all the way around the box. We're going to go down, across, and up. I'm turning the corner, just move down below, through the material, through the ribbon, and pull tight. There we go, and now we're across the bottom. We're going into that corner. And now we're turning. We're going to go up the other side. Look, and there we are. We went all the way down, across, and back up the other side. If you weren't using very strong thread, you would go back down the way you came and sew it again, so like in reverse. But because you're going to be using nylon upholstery thread or the point shoe thread that came in a sewing kit designed for point shoes, you won't need to sew it twice. Okay, so now I'm going to show you. We're going to go into a different stitch. I'm telling you, please do not sew through the drawstring casing. Stay right on that seam, okay? It's a good, nice little guide for you. We're going to do what's called a back stitch. So we're going to do a stitch moving forward. And this time, you're going to go all the way through. Make sure you don't sew through your ribbon, so I'm constantly flipping that ribbon over. Well, of course you want to sew through your ribbon, but not through the loose part of the ribbon. And there we go. See? And now it's right underneath the drawstring casing. And the reason it's called a back stitch is because of this right here. So we went forward a whole stitch, right? See, there we are. Now we're going to go back a little bit, about halfway backwards. This is going to make sure it's very nice and strong. There we go, pull it through. And we're going to do that again until we get all the way across. We're going to move forward and back halfway. So here's my forward stitch. That's the bigger stitch. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and move back. There we go. Forward. That's me straightening out the thread. See, when I grab it from the base and then I drag my fingers along it, that's me straightening out the thread and making sure there's no lumps, bumps, and that the needle's at the very end of the thread there. And here we go. I think this is probably the last one for this type of stitch. And there we go. One more moving backwards. And that's looking pretty nice. I'm going to move my thread over by doing a whip stitch all the way back to where I started. So there's my whip stitch. Okay, now we're going to do some big long stitches up and over the drawstring. So we're not going to go through the drawstring casing. Once again, we're going to go up and over. This is going to keep that ribbon attached to the very top of the drawstring casing. So it's going to be like hugging it, but it's not going to be sewn through it. And that's going to help it stay up against your foot. Okay, so I got a little knot. Don't freak out. Just pull on it and then pull through. There you go. See, just wiggle it around until you get it. Just don't keep pulling it tight, right? You want to kind of pull it back toward you and then wiggle it around. Okay, so you see I'm kind of going to lean my ribbon forward just a touch, going toward the box, toward the platform of the shoe. Definitely don't want to lean it going away from the box. So either straight up or with a slight lean forward. With the stretch ribbon, it's not as noticeable if you don't do a slight lean forward because it molds to your ankle shape a little better. There we go, see? Up and over. Do not sew through like I just did. Right, we want to go up and over. There, we check it and then we can pull it through. And we just continue this stitch. You're going to be able to fit 4 or 5 of these long up and over stitches along the top of your shoe there. Checking it and then pulling it through. Right underneath the drawstring on the seam. On this very last one, I'm going through the edge of the ribbon, and I'm going to do one more up and over. Right here, I'm showing you that's where my thread came through. This is how we're going to tie a knot. So we're going to sew another stitch right where the thread is coming out of the fabric. So here's my needle halfway through. You're going to see you have your thread attached to your needle and your thread attached to the fabric. You're going to use the one attached to the fabric and you're going to wrap it around the sharp end of the needle. So wrap it around once, wrap it around twice, and there you can see it's wrapped around twice. And then you're going to hold that thread down with your thumb, keep pushing that needle through, and pull it out and pull it tight. And then you have your knot right up against your fabric. And there you have it. You have one ribbon sewn on your point shoe. We went down and around with our whip stitch, across the top with our back stitch, and then up and over the drawstring with that slight lean forward or keeping it straight up and down. And there we go. Nice and strong. Moving on to the other side, I'm going to show you the exact same thing, just with the pink thread. You can see here one of my threads didn't get pulled all the way through. If it looks like it's a little knot or wrapped up on itself, you can take the end of your needle and kind of just pull it away from the fabric and try pulling it again. There, see, now it evened out. Again, here you can see it didn't get pulled through evenly. That's okay. Just drag your fingers along the thread and see if it comes through. And it did. Uh-oh, a little tangle. That's okay. Remember, we just pull it back out the way we were sewing. And then pull and open it. There we go. And you're good to go. And there's our knot. I'm going to split the threads there and pull nice and tight, especially when you have this thicker, more stiff thread, just to make sure that knot is really secure and it's not going to untie. And then we're going to trim it here in a second. You want to leave just a little bit of the tail thread on so that it doesn't unsew, it stays closed. And now that we have our ribbons on nice and secure, we're going to move on to the elastics. So like I said, we're sewing a single elastic, not a crisscross. So, pulling a thread there. So we're going to see this is the back seam. We used that earlier to fold up. Now we're going to measure about a pinky width away from it, 1/4 of an inch or so, or the width of a pencil, and you're going to make a small mark. Okay, it's okay if you mark on the outside with the pencil. No one's going to see it from stage, right? And we're going to melt the end of our elastic. There we go. See, it caught a little bit, but I just blew it out. There we go. Melt, melt, melt. So you can sew it on the inside if you would like, but sometimes that can be a little trickier to attach it that way, and it might rub on your heel. We don't want to sew it on the very edge, okay? We want to make sure we sew it down about 1/2 inch or so, okay? 1/2 to 1/4 of an inch below the drawstring seam. There we go, we're lined up. Straight up and down is fine. You don't need to sew it at an angle. Straight up and down, just so it's nice and easy, okay? Here I'm just checking it, making sure that it's where I like it. And just an explanation for why we want to keep our ribbons on the inside and not on the outside like the elastic. That's the part of your foot that the audience sees a lot, right? the arch of your foot, right where your foot is pointing, that's where the audience looks. So we don't want to have it look messy and sewn on the outside. So I just made a little line approximately how far up I'm going to sew it on. I'm going to put that right underneath the drawstring, okay? There you can see. And that's how we're going to keep it aligned as we're sewing and adjusting as we go. Alright, so we're going to just use our whip stitch on this one. We're going to go around the bottom of the box twice. We're not going to sew across. Give my little thread a haircut, and we're going to keep going with our whip stitch. So there we are, going through the fabric of the shoe, through the elastic. Make sure our thread's out of the way. And we're going to go ahead and pull it through once we make sure it's nice and aligned. That line on the outside really helps you keep it where it needs to be. And constantly adjusting, making it so it's easy for you to hold. Just figure out the way you like to hold it, what feels nicest for you. And we're going to keep going. Whip stitch. Just push it on through. Reach and move the thread out of the way. Little scraps there. And push it through, pull it through. And just keep going all the way around till you get to the top of the other side. And there we go. We did one time down, across, and up. So we're not going to sew across the top. We're just going to sew in reverse of the way we started. So we're going to go in between the stitches as best you can. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? We're learning. There we go. And through the other one, and just keep going as such all the way back around till you get back to the very beginning. I'm going to do one final stitch off of the elastic. So I'm moving my thread by doing a stitch over there on the satin, and I'm going to do another one right there, again using the thread that's attached to the fabric. You're going to wrap around your needle to tie your thread into a knot. So wrap around once, wrap around twice. There we go. Hold that down with your thumb. And let's get that needle pulled through so that we have a nice knot. There we go. Separate those threads and pull it nice and taut. And a little haircut. Make sure that it doesn't get cut too close, right? We want a little bit of thread just in case it wants to start untying. And that's one side of your elastic. For the other side of the elastic, we have to measure, okay? So we're going to put our foot in our shoe to do this. We want to make sure it's not going to be too loose or too tight. So we're putting our shoe on, and we're going to be sitting up so that our foot can be flexed, okay? Flexed and pushed down onto the floor with some pressure on it. Do not point your foot when you do this. You want it to be at its widest, your ankle at its widest, and that's going to be in this flexed position like you were going to be in a plie, okay? So we're going to take our elastic around the top of our ankle. Here we go, and around. Now that's too loose, okay? So we're going to pull it taut and then around. And we want to check, can we get our finger underneath? Yes. But we don't want it so tight that it's going to be cutting off our circulation. That's very uncomfortable. So tight enough to keep the back of our shoe on, but not tight enough to cut off your circulation. And there we go. We're going to make a little mark along that elastic. Just a quick little mark. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm grabbing my pencil here. So I'm going to pull it across one more time. There we go. And then just a little mark on the elastic. There we go. There's my mark. It's at a little bit of a diagonal, but we're going to change that. We're just going to mark a straight line through that diagonal, okay? And that's going to make it easier to sew on. So we can see the diagonal. We're just going to go straight across. So we're going to make a line straight across. Great. And your ankle is going to be either smaller, bigger, it doesn't matter. Just measure it to your ankle, okay? Don't pay attention to how big my ankle is. But I need to trim it a little bit. A lot of extra elastic material. Do not cut it so close, right? We want it about a half an inch or so, or an inch away from that line. There we go. And we're gonna melt. There you go. Now, if you were really smart, you would take your other elastic right now and lay it alongside that elastic that you already measured and trim it to be the right length. And you would use the same pencil marks. You would mark the same distance for the pencil marks on the other elastic so that you were ready for your other side. We're going to use pink thread on this side. I'm just going to let you watch. Right here I'm showing you that you don't want it to have a twist in it, okay? So make sure you're double, triple checking that you're sewing it on with the elastic so it will lay flat. You don't want to have a little twist. And there you have it. You have sewn your pointe shoe. Of course, we have to do the other one, but you're halfway there. Thanks for watching, and I hope this really helped you guys out. I'll see you next time.